emergency rescue, of resiliency, of attempts at sustainability, rather than some kind of clear march toward advanced heights of civilization. We're into an era of decay and repurposing of broken structures, of new social inventions within networks, a world of Gothic high-tech and favela chic, as I've called it, a crooked network bazaar of history and futurity rather than a cathedral of history and a utopia of maturity. That's just the situation on the ground. I don't want to belabor this point. I don't want to go on and on about the fact that this is a new historical situation. If you don't get it by now, you will be forced to get it. You will have no other choice. The question is, now what? I mean, given that we have atemporal organized representations of formal structures, what can we actually do? I mean, where's the fun part? Where is the fun part? And I think there could be some, actually. You know, we are living in an atemporal network culture, and I don't think it requires a moral panic. I mean, I think it ought to be regarded as something like moving into a new town. Like, we moved into a new town, the first order of business is like, okay, what gives around here? Well, there seems to be sort of this decayed castle and this sort of lot of slum. It's not a thing that requires like a punk no future rage. Like, you've taken away my future and I'm going to kill you or kill myself or throw a brick at a cop. I don't really think that's really helpful. What's really needed here is a kind of atemporality that's like agnosticism. Just a calm, pragmatic, serene skepticism about the historical narratives. I mean, they just don't map onto what's going on, so how do we just like sound out our new scene? You know? What can we do to kind of liven things up, especially as creative artists? Well, the immediate impulse is going to be the Frankenstein mashup. Because that's sort of a native expression of network culture. And the Frankenstein mashup is to just take elements of past, present, future, and just sort of collide them together as collage, more or less semi-randomly. Just kind of like a surrealist core exquisite. And you know, you can do useful and interesting things about that in that way, but I don't really think that offers us a great deal. Even when it's done very deftly, it tends to lend to the kind of leveling blandness of world music, the kind of world music that's just like, you know, middle-of-the-road disco music that includes pygmy nose flutes or sitars, you know, just kind of a thing that's sort of tragically easy to do, but not really very effective. You know, I mean, it's cheap to do. It's very punk rock. It's very, you know, safety pins and plastic bags, but it's missing a philosophical high end, really a kind of atemporal meaning of life high art. You know, and I would like to see some of that. I think there's a large hole there that can be filled from an atemporal perspective. Not at the lowest end of artistic expression, but way up at the top, philosophical end. Then there are things like the increasing vogue we have for lost futures, steampunk, atom punk, diesel punk. You're finding earlier methods of production, pretending that they had never become defunct and then adding on to those. I would add to those, you could do a lot of good work with the materiality of dead regimes and also with colonialism. These have been hobby activities and even sci-fi fan activities. I think they could be classed up very considerably. Then there's other elements which are native to our period that didn't really work before, such as generative art. I take generative art quite seriously. I'd like to see it move into areas like generative law or maybe generative philosophy. And the thing I like about generative art is kind of drains human intentionality out of the art project. I mean, in saying generative manufacturing, you're writing code for a computer fabricator, and you yourself don't know the outcome of this code. You do not know how it will physically manifest itself. Therefore, you end up with creative objects that are sort of bleached of human intent. Now, there's tremendous artistic intent in the software, but the software is not visible in the finished product. To me, it's of great interest that these objects and designs and animations and so forth now exist among us, because they really are, in a strange way, divorced from any kind of historical ideology. They're just not human. There are potential and new forms of collaborative art that have no single authors. Open source arts, multiplayer arts, multimedia collaboration, online world building is of great interest. That was not physically possible before. It's something we can do, nobody else can do. You know, I'm listing these methods. Some of them will work, some of them will turn out to be dead ends. The things that interest me is that they can be done from this particular perspective, and they can be fresh. The pre-distressed antique futurity. William Gibson wrote about this when he was writing about Atemporality, associating it with his Zero History novel that he's working on. Gibson was saying that if you have a genuinely avant-garde idea, something that's really new, you should write about it or create about it as if it were being read 20 years from now. In other words, in order to do it, you want to strip away the sci-fi chrome, the sense of wonder. You want it to be antiqued before it hits the page or the screen. Imagine that it was 20 years gone into the future. I mean, just approach it from that perspective. No longer allow yourself to be hypnotized by this sense of technical novelty. Just refuse to go there. Accept that it's already passé and create it from that point of view. Try to make it news that stays news.